Senator Jack Reed just publicly humiliated Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent during a Senate Banking Committee hearing, calling his conduct absolutely childish after Bessent repeatedly refused to take responsibility for overseeing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, two taxpayer-backed mortgage giants where Treasury holds massive preferred stock ownership. Reed exposed Bessent dodging questions about documented legal violations at these agencies while simultaneously deflecting accountability to other departments. Watch how a seasoned senator dismantles a cabinet official trying to avoid his legal obligations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, the President announced on January 9th, in his words, quote, effective January 20th, 2026, I, as President of the United States, am calling for a one-year cap on credit card interest rates of 10%. In remarks at the World Economic Forum in Davos, the President further said, quote, the profit margin for credit card companies now exceeds 50%. He also indicated that Americans are paying 28, 30% interest rates. You were one of his top economic advisors, Mr. Secretary. Do you support interest rate caps to improve affordability on credit?
I wholeheartedly support President Trump's policy, and I think that what you've just said would be in direct contrast to what Senator Warren said about this administration favoring the big banks. But those are facts.
Well, I don't think my statement indicates at all what Senator Warren said or meant. I wanted an answer. You gave me one. Yep. But let's look at the current situation. We already have legislation that protects service members by putting a 36% cap, not just on credit cards, but all credit relationships, and it protects them from being exploited. And as in my youth, I was a company commander and saw it firsthand. Would it make sense as a first step to provide a 36% interest rate for all Americans, not just service members?
36% doesn't seem like much protection to me, Senator.
Well, it's better than some of the things that are being presented to service members without the rates. These new plans to buy commodities, and sometimes the rates go to 500, and still today you have entrepreneurs who are charging extraordinary rates, and particularly to vulnerable populations, which I know they don't congregate at Harvard Square, but they also don't hang out in New Haven either. So I think that would be a sound step, Mr. Secretary.
Senator, you haven't seen all of New Haven.
I haven't, but I've seen a lot of it, the parts that you might have missed.
Here's what actually happened in that exchange. Senator Jack Reed confronted Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent with specific allegations about governance failures at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and Bessent's response was to immediately deflect responsibility, not take ownership, not explain the situation, just pass the buck to another federal agency. Reed laid out the facts methodically. The Federal Housing Finance Agency Director William Pulte appointed himself to the boards of both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. According to 10 U.S. senators who formally requested an Inspector General investigation in April 2025, federal law explicitly states that the FHFA Director may not hold any office, position, or employment in these regulated entities. It's not ambiguous. The statute is crystal clear. And yet Pulte is sitting as chair of both boards simultaneously while also running the agency that's supposed to regulate them. This isn't some technical violation buried in regulatory minutia. This is the person in charge of supervising these mortgage giants, also controlling their boards, creating massive conflicts of interest. And when Reed pressed Bessent on what Treasury was doing about these documented violations, Bessent's answer was essentially, not my problem, talk to FHFA. But here's what Bessent conveniently ignores. Treasury isn't just some passive observer here. The American taxpayers, through Treasury, provided the financial backstop that kept Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac from collapsing during the 2008 financial crisis. Treasury holds preferred stock in both entities. Treasury has a fiduciary responsibility to ensure these institutions operate legally and protect taxpayer interests. You don't get to take credit for stabilizing the mortgage market and then wash your hands of all oversight responsibility when problems emerge. Reed pointed out this exact contradiction. When it suits the administration politically, they tout their involvement in housing finance. Treasury Secretary Bessent himself warned in November 2025 that the housing market was in recession and urged the Federal Reserve to cut rates faster. So he clearly sees housing finance as within his purview when making policy recommendations. But the moment a senator asks him about legal compliance at the institution's Treasury has billions invested in, suddenly it's someone else's jurisdiction. Let me give you an analogy for how absurd this is. Imagine you're a major investor in a company. You own significant shares, you have board representation rights, you publicly comment on the company's performance and strategy, then that company starts violating its own corporate governance rules, potentially breaking federal law. And when someone asks you, the major investor, what you're doing about these violations, you respond, "Not my department, talk to the compliance office." That would be a dereliction of your fiduciary duty. That's exactly what Bessent is doing here, except the stakes are the stability of the American housing finance system. Reed also pressed Bessent on credit card interest rates, highlighting another example of selective responsibility. The Military Lending Act caps interest rates at 36% for active duty service members. It's federal law. Service members cannot be charged predatory rates above that threshold. Regular American civilians get no such protection. Credit card companies routinely charge 25, 28, 30% or higher to ordinary families struggling with expenses. Reed asked a straightforward question. If we can protect troops from predatory lending, why can't we extend that same protection to all Americans? Trump campaigned on capping credit card interest rates. The administration promised to make life more affordable. So where's the action? Where's the proposal? Where's the Treasury Secretary using his platform and authority to push for legislation that would actually help working families? Bessent's response was, again, deflection. He didn't defend the status quo. He didn't explain why service members deserve protection, but their civilian neighbors don't. He just sidestepped the question entirely, suggesting it wasn't really Treasury's call to make. This is what cowardice looks like in a Senate hearing. An official who knows the policy is indefensible but won't admit it, so he just tries to run out the clock with non-answers. And this is where Reed had absolutely had enough. After watching Bessent dodge, deflect, and duck responsibility repeatedly, Reed delivered the line that encapsulates the entire exchange. Your behavior to some of my colleagues is absolutely childish. Think about what it means for a sitting U.S. senator to publicly call a cabinet secretary childish. Reed isn't some bomb-throwing freshman looking to make viral clips. He's the senior senator from Rhode Island, a former Army Ranger, someone who has served in the Senate for decades with a reputation for being measured and substantive. When someone with that profile calls your conduct childish in a public hearing, it's because your behavior has been genuinely beneath the dignity of your office. What we're really seeing here is part of a much larger pattern with this administration. Accountability is always someone else's responsibility. When good things happen, they take credit. When problems emerge, they point fingers at agencies, at predecessors, at Congress, at anyone except themselves. Treasury won't take responsibility for Fannie and Freddie governance because that would require acknowledging problems exist. Bessent won't champion credit card interest caps because that would upset financial industry donors who benefit from the current system. This matters because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac aren't just any companies. They guarantee or own roughly half of all mortgages in the United States. They are the backbone of the American housing finance system. If governance at these institutions breaks down, if they're run by people operating with conflicts of interest, if federal law is being violated in their oversight, that's not some abstract regulatory concern. That directly affects whether families can get affordable mortgages, whether the housing market remains stable, whether another financial crisis could be brewing. And I want everyone watching to think about who the real victims are here. It's not Senator Reed. He's a United States Senator who will continue doing his oversight job regardless of whether Bessent cooperates or not. It's not even really Bessent, though he certainly damaged his credibility with this performance. The real victims are the American families who need a functioning housing market, the first-time home buyers trying to navigate an already difficult market who need institutions like Fannie and Freddie operating properly to access affordable financing, the taxpayers who bailed out these mortgage giants in 2008 and deserve assurance that their money is being managed responsibly under proper legal oversight. It's the working families carrying credit card debt at 28% interest while watching their elected representatives promise relief that never materializes. It's the service member who comes home from deployment and discovers their civilian spouse has been hit with predatory rates that would be illegal if applied to the service member directly. Those are the people being failed when cabinet secretaries show up to hearings unprepared to take responsibility for the agencies under their purview. Those are the people getting hurt when officials prioritize protecting powerful financial interests over protecting ordinary Americans. The bottom line is this. Jack Reed came to that hearing prepared with specific questions about legal violations and policy failures that directly affect American families. Scott Bessent came prepared to deflect, dodge, and avoid accountability at all costs. Reed exposed exactly what happens when an administration appoints people more interested in serving the president's political agenda than in actually doing the job they were confirmed to do. And when a respected senior senator with decades of experience publicly calls your behavior childish, maybe it's time to look in the mirror and ask whether you're really serving the American people or just trying to protect yourself from uncomfortable questions, one abdicated responsibility at a time. If you appreciate this kind of detailed breakdown of what's really happening in Senate hearings, please hit that like button and subscribe. Turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos where we cut through the deflection and focus on accountability. Share this with someone who needs to understand how these officials operate. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.